When my father mentioned updating his will, it was like a switch flipped in my sister's mind. A quiet, simmering suspicion that I wasn't her real brother erupted into a full-blown obsession. She wasn't content with just whispers. She hatched a meticulous, fraudulent plan to fake my DNA, prove I was adopted, and erase me from the family forever, all for a bigger piece of the inheritance. My sister Fiona and I have always orbited each other at a safe, predictable distance. I'm 28 now, she's 31, and for the better part of 3 decades, our relationship has been defined by a comfortable, if somewhat sterile, neutrality. We weren't the kind of siblings who shared secrets late into the night or called each other for advice. Ours was a relationship built on the foundation of shared holidays, the occasional text message about a new movie, and a mutual understanding that we were, for better or worse, family. It was a decent, low-maintenance connection, the kind that hums along in the background of life without much fanfare or drama. That all changed about 6 months ago. The catalyst wasn't a fight or a grand betrayal, but a single, innocuous sentence uttered by our dad during a quiet Sunday dinner. Our dad is a man who embodies the American dream. He's the quintessential self-made success story, having built a thriving, contracting business from the ground up with little more than grit and a second-hand pickup truck. He's smart, hardworking, and now, in his early 60s, comfortably well off. Our mother passed away 8 years ago, a slow and cruel departure at the hands of cancer that left a permanent, hollow space in our family. It was just the three of us now. That evening, as Dad was clearing the plates, he mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he'd been thinking about updating his will. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. There was no sense of foreboding. It was just a practical statement from a man who liked his affairs to be in order. He talked about setting up trusts, legacy planning, the usual financial housekeeping for someone contemplating a well-earned retirement. Fiona and I are his only children, so the math was simple. His considerable assets would be split between us. I nodded, mumbled something about it being a smart idea, and didn't give a second thought. But for Fiona, that casual mention of a will was like a starter pistol firing in a silent stadium. The change wasn't instantaneous, but it was profound. Over the next few weeks, the sister I knew began to vanish, replaced by a suspicious, almost hostile stranger who looked at me as if I were an imposter. She became fixated on a single, bizarre idea, that I didn't truly belong in our family. The first volley was fired a couple of weeks later, back at Dad's house. Fiona was standing by the fireplace, idly examining the gallery of family photos on the mantel. She picked up a silver-framed picture of me as a baby, swaddled in a blue blanket, a chubby, expressionless infant staring blankly into the camera's lens. She held it for an unnervingly long time, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. "You know," she said, her voice laced with a strange, analytical tone, "you really don't look like either mom or dad in this picture." I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, and I laughed it off. "Fiona, all babies look like wrinkled potatoes. It's impossible to tell anything from that." It was a deflection, an attempt to steer the conversation back to normalcy. But she was relentless. "No, seriously," she insisted, walking over and holding the photo right up to my face, forcing me to look. "Look at your nose. It's not Dad's. And your eyes. Where did those features even come from?" The intensity in her gaze was unsettling. Dad was in the kitchen, the sound of the dishwasher providing a mundane soundtrack to this increasingly bizarre interrogation. I felt a prickle of discomfort, a defensive urge rising in my chest. "You're being weird," I said, pushing the photo away. "Genetics is complicated. People get features from grandparents, great-uncles. It's not a simple copy and paste job." She didn't argue. She just gave me a long, searching look, a look that said she believed I was hiding something monumental. That single, unsettling conversation was the beginning of a quiet, insidious campaign. Fiona began to pepper our interactions with strange, loaded comments. She would talk about my mannerisms, my taste in music, my sense of humor, framing them all as evidence of my difference. She was constructing a narrative, brick by brick, in which I was an outsider, a cuckoo in the family nest. The situation escalated from private interrogations to public insinuations. Last month, we were at our cousin's 30th birthday party. It was a loud, cheerful affair in a rented-out brewery, the kind of family gathering we'd navigated with ease for years. I was making my way back from the bar when I overheard Fiona's voice cutting through the din. She was talking to our Aunt Carol, her back to me, but her words were sharp and clear. I've just always suspected something wasn't right about him, you know? There's always been something off. My feet froze to the floor. Aunt Carol looked over Fiona's shoulder, and her eyes widened when she saw me standing there. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent warning. Fiona, catching our aunt's expression, turned around. She didn't look embarrassed or apologetic. There was no flicker of shame in her eyes. She just looked at me, a cool, defiant expression on her face, and then shrugged as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my ears burning with humiliation and a profound sense of bewilderment. Who was this person? What had happened to my sister? The weirdest, most unnerving part of this transformation was her sudden, all-consuming obsession with genetics and DNA. She became a self-styled expert on ancestry, inheritance, and the shocking secrets that science could unearth. Our text chain, once a place for harmless memes, became a repository for articles she would send me, each one a thinly veiled message. Couple discovers their siblings after 10 years of marriage thanks to DNA test. Man finds out his father isn't his biological parent after Ancestry Kit. Woman uncovers secret family adoption through 23andMe. Her message was clear, a constant, passive-aggressive drumbeat. DNA doesn't lie. Science can reveal the truth. The subtext was suffocating. The pressure continued to build until it culminated in a direct confrontation last week. She cornered me in the hallway at Dad's house, blocking my path to the kitchen. Her eyes were wide, almost feverish with conviction. "Have you ever wondered about your real parents?" she asked, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. The question was so out of left field, so profoundly insane, that I was momentarily stunned into silence. "What the hell are you talking about, Fiona?" I finally managed to stammer. "I'm just saying," she pressed on, completely unfazed by my shock. "I've been doing a lot of reading about family genetics lately, and you're just so different from everyone else in the family. It makes you think." I tried to talk to Dad about it, but the words felt clumsy and inadequate. "How do you explain that your sister has developed a baseless conspiracy theory about your parentage without sounding like you're the one who's losing your mind?" I settled for a vague, watered-down version. "Fiona seems really stressed lately," I told him. "She's been saying some odd things." He nodded slowly. "I've noticed she's been a bit more intense recently," he admitted. "I just figured it was stress from her job." He didn't press for details, and I didn't offer them. What's truly messing with my head is that Fiona isn't acting like she's just trying to be cruel or start drama for the sake of it. There's a terrifying sincerity to her delusion. She seems genuinely 100% convinced that there is a massive, life-altering secret about my birth, and that she is the brave truth seeker destined to uncover it. But here's the thing, the bedrock of reality that her fantasy is crashing against. I know, for an absolute fact, that I am my father's biological child. It's not a question. It's a certainty woven into the very fiber of my being. I have his hands, the same long fingers and square palms. I have his laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that starts in the chest. I have his utterly irrational tendency to get furious at inanimate objects that refuse to cooperate. From my mother, I inherited a stubborn streak a mile wide and her bizarrely flexible, double-jointed thumbs. I am a mosaic of them both, a collection of their traits, their quirks, their varied DNA. So, I'm left to wonder if Fiona is in the midst of some kind of mental health crisis. The timing, so perfectly aligned with Dad's talk of updating his will, feels too precise to be a coincidence. Is her anxiety about the inheritance, about getting her fair share, so profound that she's manufactured a reality where I'm not entitled to any of it? Could this be some deeply buried, delayed psychological reaction to our mother's death, a grief that has twisted itself into this monstrous, unrecognizable form. I don't know what to do. Her behavior is escalating. Just the other day, she started making pointed comments about DNA testing and getting to the truth right in front of Dad. He just laughs it off, oblivious to the venomous intent behind her words. But I can see a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He's starting to notice that something is deeply wrong with his daughter. I feel like I'm trapped in a slow-motion nightmare, and I'm desperate for a way to wake up. I should have known Fiona's obsession wouldn't just fizzle out. It was a fire that needed more fuel, and she was determined to create it herself. A few days after my original post, she decided to turn her private fixation into a grand, public spectacle. She showed up at Dad's house armed with a laptop and a stack of printed materials, announcing that she had an exciting proposal for the whole family. She had orchestrated this whole thing, calling Dad and me over under the pretense of planning a summer barbecue. We sat in the living room, completely unsuspecting, as she launched into a full-blown presentation on the wonders of genealogy and family history. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She had charts, she had articles, she had a slick PowerPoint deck. She spoke with the passion and authority of a seasoned academic, detailing the incredible advancements in genetic genealogy and the power of DNA testing to build a comprehensive family tree. She pitched it as this incredible, multi-generational bonding project. She painted a beautiful picture of us all coming together, contributing our DNA to a collective effort, and creating a legacy for future generations. Her research was, I had to admit, impressive. She had compared the accuracy rates of different testing companies. She had analyzed the size of their genealogical databases. She had even looked into the privacy policies of each one. She spoke eloquently about how we could connect with long-lost, distant relatives, trace our family's migration patterns from Europe, and maybe even solve some of the lingering mysteries in our lineage, like the true story of our great-great-grandfather who supposedly jumped ship to come to America. Dad, a man who loves history and has always been fascinated by our family's roots, was immediately hooked. He leaned forward, his eyes alight with genuine interest. Fiona had played him like a fiddle. She knew exactly which buttons to push, weaving a narrative of historical discovery and familial connection that was perfectly tailored to his interests. She dangled the possibility of discovering connections to historical figures or finding living relatives in countries we'd only read about. But it was her next move that made my blood run cold. Fiona insisted, with a tone of unwavering scientific authority, that for the project to be truly successful, everyone had to participate. The DNA comparisons, she explained, would only be meaningful if the lab had samples from multiple generations and across different branches of the family tree. Then, looking directly at me, she specifically emphasized how crucial it was that both Dad and I provide samples, as we represented the direct paternal lineage. It was all cloaked in the language of science and reason, but I could hear the real message loud and clear. It was a direct challenge, a gauntlet thrown down in the middle of our family living room. The most manipulative part of her scheme was how she framed the entire project as a heartfelt gift for Dad. She announced that she wanted to compile all the research, the DNA analysis, the old photos, and historical documents into a beautiful, leather-bound family history book, a surprise for his upcoming birthday. She presented herself as the thoughtful, loving daughter, going to extraordinary lengths to honor her father's passions. Dad was completely and utterly sold. He was practically misty-eyed, talking about how much Mom would have loved a project like this, how it would be an incredible way to feel connected to her and to the generations that came before. He immediately agreed to participate and, to my horror, picked up his phone right then and there and started calling his siblings and our cousins, enthusiastically recruiting them for Fiona's grand project. Fiona, meanwhile, played the role of the diligent project manager to perfection. She handled all the logistics with a chilling efficiency, ordering a dozen test kits, creating a shared spreadsheet to track participants, and coordinating collection times. She insisted on collecting all the sample tubes personally, explaining that it was to ensure proper handling and avoid any contamination before sending them to the lab. Within a week, she had secured commitment from nearly our entire local family. Dad, me, our two aunts, three of our cousins, and even Dad's elderly great-uncle. A wave of excitement spread through the family. Our aunt started a flurry of emails, sharing digitized versions of old, sepia-toned photographs and forgotten family documents. Everyone was swept up in the romance of it all. Everyone except me. I knew what this was really about. Fiona didn't give a damn about our great-great-grandfather or our migration patterns. This entire, elaborate, expensive production was a Trojan horse. It was her way of forcing me into a DNA test, a test she was convinced would finally prove her insane theory that I was not Dad's biological son. She believed that when the results came back, my DNA would be an anomaly, a glaring mismatch that would expose me as a fraud and an interloper. She had constructed the perfect trap. Instead of making a direct, unhinged accusation that would make her look crazy, she had created a situation that made her look like the thoughtful, organized daughter of the year. She had put me in an impossible position. If I refused to participate, I would look instantly suspicious, as if I had something to hide. If I tried to explain to anyone that Fiona's true motivation was a paranoid delusion about my parentage, I would be the one who sounded unhinged. She had backed me into a corner, leaving me with no choice but to go along with her twisted plan and pray that the cold, hard science of the DNA results would finally, mercifully, shut down her dangerous obsession. The hardest part was feigning enthusiasm while watching Dad get swept up in the project. He was so genuinely happy, so excited. He would call me every few days, his voice buzzing with some new piece of information Fiona had supposedly discovered in her research or speculating about what the DNA might reveal. He was completely oblivious, a happy, innocent pawn in his daughter's cruel game. He had no idea that she was using his love of family history as a weapon, a tool to try and prove that his son was not actually his son. I kept repeating a mantra in my head. This is going to backfire on her. The truth will come out, and she will have to face it. I clung to that thought like a life raft, hoping it would be enough to get me through the storm she had created. The box of DNA test kits arrived at Fiona's apartment, the central hub of her grand genealogical operation. She sent a cheerful, efficient text to our family group chat. The kits are here. I'll be distributing them over the next few days. I like to collect all the samples by the end of the week so I can send them to the lab in one batch for simultaneous processing. The message was so normal, so perfectly in character for the diligent project manager she was pretending to be. I was scheduled to go to her place yesterday afternoon to pick up my kit, but a last-minute crisis at work forced me to cancel. I texted her, apologizing, and said I'd swing by today instead. "No problem," she replied instantly. "If I'm not home, my roommate Sarah can give it to you. I'll leave it on the kitchen counter." So, this afternoon, I drove over to her apartment building. Sarah let me in, confirmed Fiona was out running errands, and pointed me toward the kitchen. On the gleaming granite countertop, there were two small, identical cardboard boxes, the logos of the DNA testing company emblazoned on the front. I grabbed one, my name neatly written on a sticky note attached to the top. I was about to turn and leave when a small detail caught my eye. The small, circular sticker that sealed the box had been broken. It was a minor thing, but these kits are meant to be sterile and sealed until the moment of use. A flicker of suspicion, sharp and unpleasant, went through me. I decided to open the box just to check that all the components were inside. The instruction manual was there, as was the biohazard bag for returning the sample. And then I saw the saliva collection tube. It wasn't empty. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I stared at the clear plastic tube, at the small amount of clear liquid and bubbles inside. Someone had already spit in it. For a full minute, I just stood there in Fiona's silent kitchen, trying to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be right. The whole point was that I was supposed to provide the sample. I was supposed to spit into the tube, seal it, and send it off. My first charitable thought was that it was a simple mix-up. Maybe she had accidentally given me someone else's completed kit. Perhaps our uncle had already done his, and she'd confused the boxes. But then I picked up the paperwork that was also inside the box. The activation card, the consent form, Every single document had my name neatly printed on all the required lines. And in that sickening moment, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act of sabotage. Fiona was planning to submit someone else's DNA sample under my name. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone and called her. "What the hell is going on with my test kit?" I demanded, my voice tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She feigned confusion, her voice all innocence. "What do you mean? Is something missing?" "The collection tube, Fiona," I said, my voice dangerously low. "It already has saliva in it, and the forms all have my name on them." There was a long, loaded silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she scrambled for an explanation. Then she started laughing, a high-pitched, unnatural sound. "Oh my God, you actually fell for it," she chirped. "It was just a joke. I was testing you to see if you were paying attention. I'm so impressed you caught it." The excuse was so flimsy, so transparently false, that it was almost insulting. "I filled the tube with my own spit as a prank," she continued, her voice gaining confidence. "I have your actual, sealed test kit right here. I was going to give it to you when you called." "That's not funny, Fiona," I said, my patience completely gone. "Tampering with DNA samples isn't a joke. It's fraud." She kept insisting it was a harmless prank, that I was overreacting, that she was just messing with me. But the seed of doubt had taken root and was now growing into a monstrous certainty. I hung up, my mind racing. I went home, but the image of that tube haunted me. A few hours later, I called her back. "I want to know whose DNA is really in that tube," I said, leaving no room for argument. She tried to deflect again, to laugh it off as a silly prank, but I wouldn't let it go. I kept pushing, demanding the truth. Finally, her facade crumbled. Her voice dropped, losing its forced cheerfulness. She admitted, in a sullen, resentful tone, that she had asked her friend Isabel to provide the sample. Isabel, her co-worker, a woman I had met exactly twice at holiday parties, a complete stranger with no genetic connection to our family whatsoever. The audacity of it was breathtaking. If Isabel's DNA had been submitted to the lab under my name, the results would have been exactly what Fiona wanted. They would have shown zero genetic relationship to our father, our aunts, our cousins. It would have been the proof she so desperately craved. "Why, Fiona?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this? What were you possibly hoping to accomplish?" That's when she finally dropped all pretense. The joke was over. "I need to know the truth," she said, her voice hard and cold. "I am protecting Dad's interests. If you're really his son, then you shouldn't be afraid of taking the test properly. But if you have something to hide, this would have revealed it." Her logic was so twisted, so profoundly irrational, that it was hard to follow. She seemed to believe that by submitting a fake sample, she would somehow trap me, that the fraudulent results would force me to confess to a crime I hadn't committed. It was as if she thought she could manifest her delusion into reality through sheer force of will. "That's insane, Fiona," I tried to explain, my voice rising with frustration. "Submitting Isabel's DNA would only prove that Isabel isn't related to our family, which we already know. It wouldn't prove a single thing about my genetics." But it was like talking to a brick wall. She wasn't interested in logic. She was operating in a different reality, one where she was the hero and I was the villain. "You're hiding something," she kept insisting. "Your reaction to my little prank proves that you're scared of the truth coming out." "I will take the damn test, Fiona," I finally exploded. "But I want a completely new, sealed kit that you have never laid a hand on. In fact, I'm going to order my own test directly from the lab and submit it myself, so I can be absolutely certain there is no more of your harmless tampering." That's when she got angry, accusing me of being paranoid, of ruining her beautiful family genealogy project. She wailed about how everyone was so excited and how my suspicious behavior was destroying it for everyone. I pointed out that she was the one caught trying to commit DNA fraud, but she just kept deflecting, twisting my words, and painting me as the aggressor. The conversation ended when she shrieked and hung up on me after I told her I was going to tell Dad everything she had tried to do. A minute later, My phone buzzed with a frantic text from her. Please don't involve Dad. I am sorry. It was a stupid joke. I promise I won't interfere with your real test. Please just let this go. But I wasn't letting this go. This had crossed a line. This was no longer just a weird suspicion or a hurtful comment. This was a calculated, malicious attempt to defraud our family and destroy my relationship with my father. I went online that night and ordered my own DNA test kit. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was done playing defense. This was so much worse than I had ever imagined. The DNA results came back, and to the surprise of absolutely no one but my sister, I am, unequivocally, my father's biological son. But if I thought that scientific, irrefutable proof would be the final nail in the coffin of Fiona's delusion, I was sorely mistaken. Her response to the truth was not acceptance or apology. It was a descent into a new, more alarming level of paranoia. Because I had ordered my own kit directly from the lab and expedited the processing, my results arrived a full week before the rest of the family's. I sat at my kitchen table, my heart pounding as I clicked the link in the email. And there was, in crisp, digital black and white, a 50% genetic match with my father. Clear, predictable genetic relationships with our aunts and cousins who had also gotten their results. A breakdown of European ancestry that perfectly mirrored everything we knew about our family's background. It was all there, a perfect, boring, scientific confirmation of a reality I had never once doubted. A profound sense of relief washed over me. This was it. This was the concrete evidence that would finally end Fiona's bizarre and hurtful conspiracy theory. We could finally move on from this nightmare. My first instinct was to share the results with the entire family in a group email. A triumphant vindication. But I decided to show Fiona first. I extended an olive branch, hoping that a private viewing would give her the space to acknowledge her mistake, to see the error of her ways, and maybe, just maybe, apologize for the accusations and the attempted sabotage. That was a catastrophic miscalculation. I met her for coffee at a neutral, public place. I slid my phone across the table, the results displayed on the screen. She stared at it for a long, silent minute, her expression unreadable. Then, the interrogation began. Her questions were sharp, rapid fire, like those of a skeptical lawyer cross-examining a hostile witness. Where did you order this kit from? How did you submit the sample? Were you alone when you did it? Are you sure the lab didn't contaminate your sample or mix it up with someone else's? Did anyone else handle the kit at any point? I patiently explained the process, how I had ordered it directly from the company's secure website, how I had sealed the sample myself, and how I had tracked its progress online from the moment it left my hands to the moment it was processed in the lab. The results are accurate, Fiona, I said, my voice firm. Her response was to accuse me of orchestrating a massive fraud. There's no way, she said, shaking her head, a small, bitter smile on her lips. There's just no way these results are legitimate. I know you're not his biological child. You must have figured out a way to manipulate the test. Did you get one of Dad's used coffee mugs? A hair from his brush? The absurdity of her accusation was staggering. I asked her what possible evidence, what single shred of proof she had to justify this belief. She began to list her observations, a collection of mundane behaviors that, in her warped reality, had become damning evidence of my deception. You hold your fork differently than Dad does, she said, her voice filled with a sense of triumph, as if she had just presented an irrefutable piece of evidence in a murder trial. And your laugh, it always sounds forced when you're around the family. You've always been too eager to please, too desperate to fit in. It's because you know, deep down, that you don't really belong. It was completely and utterly insane. She was taking the normal, nuanced complexities of human personality and twisting them into a sinister narrative of lifelong deception. But she wasn't finished. Her next move was even more audacious. Fiona decided that the only solution was for the entire family to retake the DNA tests, this time at a different lab, a lab that she would personally vet and select. She launched a new campaign, calling our relatives one by one to pitch her idea. She was clever, framing her request not as a paranoid obsession, but as a matter of scientific rigor. She told them that DNA testing can be unreliable, that different labs use different algorithms, and that for our important family research, it was crucial to get independent verification of the results. The most manipulative part was how she presented this to Dad. She never once mentioned her adoption theory or her attempt to sabotage my first test. Instead, she played the role of the careful, meticulous researcher, the daughter who was so dedicated to the accuracy of their shared genealogy project that she insisted on the highest possible standards. And Dad, still blissfully unaware of her true motivations, thought this sounded perfectly reasonable. To him, this was just Fiona being her usual, thorough self. He agreed to take another test and even encouraged our other family members to do the same, to support Fiona's expanded research. Fiona, emboldened by his support, immediately ordered a new batch of test kits from a different company. She was once again in charge of the collection process, a fact that made my stomach clench with anxiety. But this time I was prepared. I insisted on providing my sample with Dad present as a witness. I took photos of the sealed kit on my phone, documenting every step of the chain of custody. The entire situation felt like a surreal, frustrating loop. I knew, with absolute certainty, what the new results would show. They would be a carbon copy of the first test. They would confirm, once again, that I am my father's son. But Fiona was living in a world of her own making, a world where she was convinced that a different lab, a different set of chemicals, would somehow bend to her will and produce the results she so desperately wanted to see. I was beginning to realize that this wasn't just about the will anymore. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or inheritance anxiety. I was dealing with something far more complex and frightening. Fiona had developed what seemed to be a full-blown delusional disorder, and I was at the very center of it. She had constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory, and she was now incapable of accepting any evidence that contradicted it. When reality didn't conform to her beliefs, she simply decided that reality itself must be the lie. The temptation to tell Dad everything was immense, but I held back, worried he wouldn't believe me. Fiona's public persona was so rational, so put together, that my accusations might sound like the paranoid ramblings of a resentful brother. She had been so careful never to voice her adoption theory directly in front of him. So, I decided my best strategy was to play her game one more time. I would go along with the second round of testing and let the science speak for itself again. When the new lab confirmed my parentage, she would be faced with the undeniable fact that two independent, reputable labs had reached the exact same conclusion. Surely, that would be enough to shatter her delusion. This whole situation had morphed from a bizarre family drama into something genuinely concerning. I wasn't just dealing with a greedy sister anymore. I was dealing with a woman who had lost her grip on reality, a woman whose entire psychological state was now fixated on the single, obsessive goal of proving I was not part of our family. I told Dad everything. The dam of secrecy I'd built to protect him, and maybe even to protect Fiona from herself, finally broke, and the resulting flood has washed her completely out of our lives. This whole ugly saga exploded in a way I never could have anticipated. And while the fallout has been painful, my overwhelming feeling is one of profound, bone-deep relief. It's over. The second round of DNA tests came back, and in a plot twist that shocked absolutely no one, the results were identical to the first. I'm still my father's biological son. I am still genetically related to our aunts, uncles, and cousins. My ancestry markers are still stubbornly, unchangeably the same. The results were essentially photocopies of the first test. Another set of scientific facts screaming a truth Fiona was determined not to hear. I had foolishly hoped that this second, independent confirmation would be the final, undeniable blow to her delusion. But instead of accepting reality, she burrowed even deeper into her fantasy. She became a frantic, obsessive researcher, scouring the internet for obscure studies on laboratory errors and DNA testing inaccuracies. She started forwarding these articles to me and Dad, insisting that both labs must have made the exact same million-to-one mistake, or that there was some kind of systematic contamination that was, for some reason, affecting only my samples. But the true breaking point, the moment this went from a contained family crisis to a public implosion, was when she started evangelizing her adoption theory to our extended family. The subtlety was gone, replaced by a desperate, brazen campaign to recruit allies to her cause. She called her cousin Mike, a man we'd both grown up with, and unloaded on him. She told him she had serious, grave concerns about my parentage. She painted a picture of our father as a man being deceived, a victim of a long con, and that she, Fiona, was the only one brave enough to uncover the truth. She asked Mike to help her, to join her in convincing Dad to demand a third, and then a fourth, and then however many rounds of testing it took to get the correct result, all at a lab she would personally select and monitor. Mike was, to put it mildly, completely floored. He called Dad immediately after hanging up with Fiona, his voice filled with concern. He told Dad that Fiona seemed to be having some kind of breakdown, that she was making these bizarre, unhinged claims about me being adopted. The moment Dad hung up with Mike, my phone rang. "What the hell is going on with your sister?" he asked, his voice tight with a confusion that was rapidly turning to anger. In that moment, I knew I couldn't protect her anymore. My silence was no longer a kindness. It was enabling her delusion. She had escalated her campaign, pulling our extended family into her destructive orbit, and my father deserved to know exactly what his daughter had been up to. So I told him everything. The whole sordid, 6-month story poured out of me. The initial suspicious comments about old photographs, the passive-aggressive articles about secret adoptions, her manipulation of the family genealogy project, turning his innocent hobby into a weapon against me. And the ugliest part, her calculated attempt to commit fraud by submitting a stranger's DNA under my name. My dad listened to the entire story in stunned, complete silence. When I finally finished, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. There was a long, heavy pause on the line. And then he said, his voice quiet and laced with a pain that cut me to the core, "She's been trying to prove you're not my son." "Why? Why would she do that?" "I think it's about the will, Dad," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I think she wanted me out of the inheritance." Dad got very quiet then and said he needed to talk to Fiona immediately. The confrontation, as he later recounted to me, was a disaster. He called her over to the house and, without any preamble, asked her directly if she had been trying to prove I was adopted. Fiona, ever the performer, initially tried to deny it, to play the victim. But when Dad brought up her attempt to sabotage the DNA test and her frantic calls to our cousin, she knew the gig was up. The lies evaporated, and the raw, ugly truth of her obsession was laid bare. She admitted everything. She told him she was certain I wasn't his biological son and that she had been trying to prove it for months. She didn't see it as a betrayal. In her twisted logic, she was the hero of the story. "I was protecting your interests, Dad," she had pleaded. "I was just making sure your inheritance went to your real child." She claimed she was motivated by love and loyalty. My dad, his voice shaking with a fury I had rarely witnessed, asked her what possible evidence she had. Fiona began listing the same pathetic, nonsensical clues she had shared with me. The way I hold my fork, the sound of my laugh, a handful of distorted childhood memories she had retrofitted to fit her narrative. My dad told her that her evidence was absurd, that she had embarked on a cruel and destructive campaign to tear our family apart based on nothing but paranoid speculation. He told her he was ashamed of her, that he couldn't understand how she could be so callous, so willing to inflict such pain on her own brother. That's when she broke down, not with remorse, but with frustration. She started sobbing, insisting that she was right, that the DNA tests were wrong, that Dad was being fooled by the master manipulator she had convinced herself I was. She begged him, one last time, to do one more round of testing, to let her prove she was right. That was the moment my father's heart, already broken by her betrayal, hardened. He told her that she was delusional. He said that her obsession with disowning me had permanently damaged our family. He told her he couldn't trust her anymore, and that he didn't want her in his life until she got professional help for the psychological issues that were so clearly driving her behavior. Fiona left my dad's house that day and has not spoken to either of us since. She has blocked my number and all my social media accounts. She's done the same to our father. His calls go straight to voicemail. His texts remain undelivered. In the aftermath, Dad has asked me, more than once, why I didn't tell him sooner. I explained that I had kept hoping she would snap out of it, that it was some temporary paranoia that would fade. I didn't want to detonate a bomb in the middle of our already fragile family. But he said he was glad I finally told him the truth. He recognized that her behavior had been escalating and shudders to think what she might have done next if left unchecked. He has made it clear, through other family members, that he will pay for any therapy she is willing to undertake, but he will not have a relationship with her until she acknowledges that her adoption theory was a harmful, baseless delusion. As for me, I am done with Fiona. Permanently. I feel no obligation to her, no desire for a future reconciliation. I don't care if she gets help or if she ever apologizes. She spent 6 months methodically trying to destroy my relationship with my father and erase me from my own family, all for money. She attempted fraud. She spread lies. That's not something you forgive. That's not something you move past. My dad has told me, in no uncertain terms, that he is making some significant changes to his estate planning. He didn't give me the details, but he mentioned that trust and loyalty are the most important factors when he thinks about his family's legacy. I suspect Fiona's financial future has been irrevocably altered. Some people might say I should find it in my heart to forgive her, that she's sick and needs help. But some betrayals cut too deep. They sever ties so fundamentally that they can never be repaired. She tried to render me a stranger in my own home, a footnote in my own family's history. And that is a betrayal I will never forget.